Well, with Kamala Harris now the presidential nominee for the Democrats are experiencing a sugar high. That sugar high is coming from the fact that Joe Biden is in fact not the nominee, but Democrats are mistaking that sugar high for Kamala Harris being an actually good and effective candidate. Now, the polls have tightened pretty dramatically, and that is, again, because Joe Biden is no longer in the race. Effectively, the race has been pushed back before the debate. So right before the debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, Joe Biden was losing, but he was losing by a marginal amount. He was within the margin of error in virtually every swing state. He was within a couple points of Donald Trump. It was a very competitive race. It is back to being a competitive race. The last several polls show that Kamala Harris is, in fact, within margin of error nationally. The Wall Street Journal has Trump up 49-47. Forbes Harris X has Trump up 51-49. The New York Times Siena poll has Trump up 48-47. Again, that is a much narrower lead than he had against Joe Biden, but Kamala Harris is not, in fact, a dead person, so that obviously is going to help her. It also means that a lot of the Democratic enthusiasm problems have gone away. Democrats were wildly unenthusiastic about their candidate, and you could feel it. It was palpable. If you have hung around Democrats, you could see they were depressed going into the election. The last thing you want is for your crowd to be depressed going into an election cycle. That depression appears to be over, but there's somewhat of a manic property to the sugar high that Democrats are currently experiencing, because the reality is that even with Kamala Harris having this enormous bump out of the gate, the media just sycophantically drooling over her. New York Magazine putting a cover out saying Camelot, like it's camel. Like, wow, the answer was there all along. The media going out of their way to erase all the truths about Kamala Harris. Even with that, Kamala Harris is still not leading in the polls. According to Decision Desk HQ, which is an excellent aggregator of polls, they find, for example, in Pennsylvania, that Donald Trump still has about a 2.5 point lead on Kamala Harris. And that is a minor decrease since the week before. In other words, the polls, Democrat versus Republican, continue to be quite durable in favor of Donald Trump, although, again, those margins are very, very narrow. And you're going to get another 3 weeks of solid coverage of Kamala Harris where the media basically just massage her. She's going to pick a vice presidential candidate sometime in the next couple of weeks. You're going to get the Democratic convention that is happening the third week of August. So it's going to be a nice 3 weeks for Kamala Harris, and then the bump is going to be over. You are seeing, of course, a massive impact on her approval rating. Martha Raddatz of ABC News, she was reporting that Kamala Harris's approval rating has bumped almost 20 points since she was announced as the nominee.
This morning, our brand new ABC News Ipsos poll shows Harris getting a real bounce. Her favorability rating among all Americans up 8 points in just 1 week. The number's even better among independents, with her favorability rising from 28% to 44% since Biden left the race. And there appears to be new enthusiasm for Harris, with 48% enthusiastic about her as the Democratic nominee, compared to 39% enthusiastic about Trump as the GOP nominee.
Okay, well, again, that enthusiasm is likely to wear off as the sort of varnish on Kamala Harris's candidacy starts to wear off. The fact is that Kamala Harris is a bad candidate. She was a bad candidate in 2019. She's a bad candidate in 2020. And she is, in fact, a bad candidate in 2024, as you will get to. She has a lot of vulnerabilities. But again, for the moment, the story is newfound Democratic enthusiasm. Lydia Polgreen, who is a left-wing columnist for the New York Times, she has an entire piece titled, "I was a Kamala Harris skeptic. Here's how I got coconut pilled." So Democrats are trying to take all of the weirdnesses of Kamala Harris and magically shift them over in real time into assets. So all the weird clips of her laughing about falling out of a coconut tree or something, those are now being turned into some sort of strength. In the same way that Democrats tried to do this. You remember that Brandon, Let's Go Brandon, started off as a mistaken chant at a NASCAR rally. You remember this? At NASCAR, there's a big event and people were shouting, "F Joe Biden." And one of the commentators there didn't want to say what exactly the crowd was chanting. So instead, the commentator said they're chanting, "Let's go Brandon." And then that became sort of a phrase used by the right. And then that was captured and used by the Democrats in terms of taking the image of Joe Biden, putting sunglasses on him with laser eyes, and then saying he was dark Brandon. So now Democrats are trying to do the same with the coconut meme. So they're calling it coconut pilled. Kamala Harris is, in fact, weird. They're trying to make her not weird, but she's kind of weird. You know what would be weird, however? If you would not use Pure Talk. That would be weird, because there's only one cell phone company that gives you free premium access to the media you actually care about. It's Pure Talk. This might be the best offer Pure Talk has ever come out with. Listen to this. When you switch your cell phone service to Pure Talk on a qualifying plan, you'll get a free 1-year insider subscription to Daily Wire Plus. That is correct. Take advantage of unlimited talk, unlimited text, 15 gigs of data, and mobile hotspot on America's most dependable 5G network for just $35 a month. And you will get 1 year free of Daily Wire Plus. The Daily Wire Plus Insider Plan gets you access to our entire library of movies, series, and documentaries, including Lady Ballers, What is a Woman, Mr. Bertram, Run, Hide, Fight, and more. Plus, you get all our daily shows uncensored and ad-free. The only way you can get this special offer is by going to puretalk.com/Shapiro. I've been telling you to stop overpaying for your cell phone plan for a very long time. If you haven't yet made that switch, now would be the best time. Go to puretalk.com/Shapiro today, switch to a qualifying plan, get 1 year free of Daily Wire Plus Insider. Again, I've been using Pure Talk myself for years. Their coverage is excellent. You'll love it. Plus, you get that special deal, puretalk.com/Shapiro today. Right? Suddenly, they're enthusiastic about coconuts. So what does Lydia Polgreen say? She says, I've always voted, but like most journalists, I've tried to keep my political views mostly to myself. She did not do a good job of that. Everyone knew that she was to the left. So she says, quote, on the morning after the disastrous June debate between Biden and Trump, I wrote with enthusiasm I believed Harris should take over at the top of the ticket and very much could be Trump. Why did I come around to Harris? Why so quickly? A lot of people are now asking themselves how they feel about Harris and whether she can do the job. All understandable questions after 5 years when many people were meh at best on her. The flash flood of endorsements, donations, and support for Harris has been astonishing. I think you can trace the beginning of the vibe shift to Biden's terrible debate and Harris's interview with CNN's Anderson Cooper shortly afterward when she crisply defended Biden and made an energetic case against Trump. Okay, that's not really what's happening here. Again, nobody actually has new thoughts about Kamala Harris. They're just trying to talk themselves into new thoughts about Kamala Harris because they're relieved that Joe Biden is not in the race. Now, there are a bunch of problems with Kamala Harris as a candidate. There are two main problems. One, she's very radical on policy and believes weird things. Two, she's a weird person. Okay, both of those things are true. We know the first because it turns out that her policies are, in fact, incredibly radical. We played last week clips of her talking about equity in an incredibly Marxist way. The basic idea was, according to Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, that everyone should end up in the same place. That is what we are all shooting for, not that everyone should have opportunity, that everyone should have equal rights. No, instead that everyone should end up at the same place, which is just communism. Kamala Harris has backed a ban on fracking. She has steadfastly stood against fossil fuels. She wants a full-scale gun seizure for quote-unquote assault weapons. And Kamala Harris is incredibly radical on a wide variety of policies. So she's weird on policy. And then there's the problem of her personally. And we're all obscuring this and pretending that it doesn't exist, but it's very real. It turns out that presidential candidates tend to expose the weirdnesses in people. People who look good at the state level, when exposed to national spotlight, very often fall apart. You see this every primary season. You remember that there are people that we all kind of liked. I can name them off the top of my head. Tim Pawlenty, senator from Minnesota. And there was a lot of talk about him a few years back as a presidential candidate. It turned out he was kind of dull. Scott Walker, super nice guy, excellent governor of Wisconsin. Early frontrunner for the Republican nomination a few years back. And it turns out just didn't have it. Governor DeSantis in Florida. Now, people like me, big backers of DeSantis because he happens to be the best governor in the country. And then it turns out that when he got on the national stage, that he kind of spoke awkwardly and all of that sort of stuff started to crop up. Kamala Harris has been on the national stage before. She is not new to us. The attempt to recast her as something magical and wonderful is odd because there are too many clips of her cackling like a crazy person, or smiling her way through various events, or delivering word salads like something out of Soup Plantation. Kamala Harris is a weird person. She's a very strange individual. And how many clips can there be of her talking about the magic of Venn diagrams and electric school buses? And again, people can pretend that that stuff doesn't exist. They can pretend that that's a personal attack, but every single candidate goes through this, every single one. So I'm focusing in on the definition of weirdness today, because Democrats are now trying to jujitsu this thing. They know Kamala Harris is weird. She is. That's just what she is. She's an elite, left coast, upper class, left winger who has a very strange kind of personal affect. And everyone knows this, right? From the bizarre laugh where she kind of starts shaking and then she laughs kind of crazily to the strange sentences that are literally impossible to diagram via sentence tree. And from all of that exists. So Democrats are trying to now say that the actual weirdos are the Republicans. Now, they've tried to make this case with Donald Trump before, that Donald Trump is weird. Okay, here's the thing. Donald Trump is baked into the cake. He's been baked into the cake for a decade at this point. Everyone has their thoughts on Donald Trump. Those thoughts ain't changing. Trying to label Donald Trump weird is like trying to label Tom Brady weird. Like these are some of the most famous people in the world. Donald Trump is the most famous person probably in human history, just based on the sheer number of people alive now who know who he is. And not only is he famous, everybody knows pretty much everything about him. There is no new fodder. So Democrats instead are focusing their ire on J.D. Vance. And they are focusing on the idea that he is weird. Now, there are two sort of definitions of weirdness, as I pointed out, with Kamala Harris, and this is also true. This is what Democrats are trying to do with J.D. Vance. They're trying to say that he is personally weird. That is a very difficult lift for J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is not personally weird. J.D. Vance is one of the most normal people ever to be a vice presidential candidate. J.D. Vance is happily married. He has kids. He goes to church regularly. Like, there's nothing about J.D. Vance that screams weird. He doesn't have, like, weird hobbies. When he speaks, he's pretty normal. He doesn't have kind of weird mannerisms or habits or anything like that. It's kind of hard to parody J.D. Vance, just in a personal sense. Very easy to parody Kamala Harris. Saturday Night Live has even done it. Kind of hard to do that with J.D. Vance because he doesn't have anything that sort of sticks out at you as strange on a personal level. So instead, they're saying that he's weird because he believes weird things. And of course, they are focusing in on the cat lady comments. And they're focusing in on the fact that a few years back, J.D. Vance in 2021 was on Tucker Carlson's show, and he was talking about how the policies of the Democratic Party are geared towards single women. And he threw out this line that, again, people say stuff on Fox News all the time. I'm not blaming J.D. Vance for this. He was running for Senate at the time. Part of the problem for J.D. is that his entire political career has been telescoped into about 3 years. He started running for Senate in 2021, and he's the vice presidential candidate in 2024. That is a very short period of time. Many of us who are in the political commentariat have said stuff like this, but it was like 10 years ago. And so there is a long trajectory where you sort of get to evolve. JD just started this game in like 2021, and now he's a vice presidential candidate. And there's a great temptation when you go on, say, Tucker Carlson's show on Fox News to deliver a funny line. So here he was back in 2021, and this is the line that Democrats are using to claim that J.D. Vance is weird.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
Okay, so again, the argument that I think he should have been making is that it is very important in society to have kids. And in fact, it is a morally superior decision to have kids. It is. And we can pretend that it is a matter of complete apathy as to whether human beings have children. All of social development, all of human survival relies on people having children. So if we have a choice as a society, whether to promote childbearing and childrearing or whether to not promote it, that is not a matter of apathy in the slightest. And that's why, presumably, you should give tax benefits for having kids. That's the case that JD, I think, is trying to make. Instead, he goes after the opposite, right? He goes in a very negative direction. So he was on Megyn Kelly. This is 3 years later now. And he explains himself on Megyn Kelly.
This comment that I made was actually motivated in part by a conversation I had with my wife where, she at the time had 2 babies. We hadn't yet had a third. And she was talking about how she felt this incredible professional pressure to not have kids because it set back her professional advancement. And what a weird society that we've set up where moms who want to work, the thought that a lot of them are having is, I can't have more babies because it's going to be bad for my career. How about we make the workplace more accommodating to working moms and working dads so that we can promote a real culture of life?
Okay, so again, that argument, if he'd made that in 2021, is totally non-controversial, or at least very difficult to make it controversial. It's the fact that he used the phrase cat lady, and now Democrats are glomming onto that. So what they've decided is, really, because they don't want Republicans painting Kamala as weird, they're going to paint JD as weird. Democrats are trying very hard to make JD Vance a weirdo. They keep saying that he's weird. But you know what would be weird? Not solving your tax issues. Handling tax issues alone, like back taxes, unfiled returns, that can be a huge mistake. It can cost you thousands of dollars. In these challenging times, your best offense is with Tax Network USA. With over 14 years of experience, the experts at Tax Network USA have saved clients millions in back taxes. Regardless the size of your tax issue, their expertise will work to your advantage. Tax Network USA offers 3 key services: protection, compliance, and settlement. Upon signing up, Tax Network USA will immediately contact the IRS to secure a protection order, ensuring aggressive collection activities like garnishments, levies, or property seizures are halted. If you haven't filed in a while, need amended returns, or you're just missing records, Tax Network USA's expert tax preparers will update all your filings to eliminate the risk of IRS enforcement. Then, they'll create a settlement strategy to reduce or eliminate your tax debt. The IRS is the largest collection agency on planet Earth. Now that tax season is over, collection season has begun. Tax Network USA can even help with state tax issues. For a complimentary consultation, call today 1-800-958-1000 or visit their website, tnusa.com/Shapiro. That's 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Shapiro today. Do not let the IRS take advantage of you. Get the help you need with Tax Network USA. Again, I think this is a dog that is not going to hunt particularly well. And this is coming from somebody who thinks that, Donald Trump, strategically speaking, could have made easier picks for VP. But this isn't about that. This is about Democrats slandering J.D. Vance as weird in order to avoid the consequence of the fact that they picked a very weird vice president in 2020 who is now their presidential candidate. So, over the last 2 days, according to Tom Elliott, founder of Grabien, CNN and MSNBC have suggested that J.D. Vance is weird more than 150 times in 2 days. Right? The Democratic media complex rides again. They are all in coordination, and you can sense the joie de vivre in the media. The media are overjoyed. For like 3 weeks there, they had massive cognitive dissonance. They hate Donald Trump. They hate J.D. Vance. And so they were like, oh my God, but we still have to cover the fact that Joe Biden is senile. What do we do? What do we do? So they forced Joe Biden out of the race. And now they're back in their comfort place. They're back to eating their comfort. They're in the corner eating cartons of ice cream and making fun of J.D. Vance, like their favorite thing to do. So Chuck Schumer goes on the Sunday shows and he labels J.D. Vance weird.
The addition of J.D. Vance to this ticket, it's incredibly bad choice. I think Donald Trump, I know him, and he's probably sitting and watching the TV, and every day it comes out Vance has done something more extreme, more weird, more erratic. Vance seems to be more erratic and more extreme than President Trump. And I'll bet President Trump is sitting there scratching his head and wondering, why did I pick this guy?
Okay, so again, the idea here is that he's weird. Jen Psaki, who went directly from being the press secretary for Joe Biden to being the press secretary for Kamala Harris, but working for MSNBC, she also says that J.D. Vance is weird.
Kamala Harris in so many ways might just be the right candidate at the right time. The right candidate for this century, by the way. She might be the right candidate to tell the country that actually we don't have to go back. To tell the country that actually back wasn't so great for lots of Americans and that we can go forward instead. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is going to be easy. It is not. Donald Trump and his weirdo running mate and the Republican apparatus behind them will regroup. They will throw everything. It's going to be gross, misogynistic, sexist, racist, all of the things.
So this is the candidacy they're going to try and run, is that if you point out that Kamala Harris is in fact both weird on policy and personally, this means that you're a racist and a sexist, and the actual weirdo is the perfectly normal guy from Ohio who's married with kids and goes to Catholic church. That and believes in traditional family and thinks that it's actually kind of a big social issue if people aren't having kids. J.B. Pritzker, who is the ridiculous governor of Illinois, possible VP pick apparently, he too was suggesting that Trump and Vance are weird.
Just weird. I mean, they really are. The things that they stand for. Donald Trump, of course, is afraid of windmills, and he talks about all kinds of crazy stuff. His running mate, as you probably have heard, is getting known for his obsession with couches, and somebody who is hiding his views on a woman's right to choose. And then just broadly, the attack on people who are childless and saying that we had to raise taxes on childless people, calling them cat ladies. I think, he apologized to cats, but he hasn't apologized to women.
Okay, again, the idea here is this is all projection. It's all projection. Okay, how do we know it's projection? Because it's true that there is a weird position with regard to having children or not having children as a society. And there is a weird position with regard to traditional family versus alternative lifestyles. That weird position is that all of these things are morally equivalent. They are not, or that they're societally equivalent in terms of their benefit to society, because they're not. It turns out that all functioning societies are rooted in a traditional family structure that is built around having kids. That is utterly uncontroversial. If it's controversial to you, then you probably should look at your priors. Every society is rooted in the little platoons represented by families, and those families have to be built for the future, or the society doesn't have a future. Alternative perspectives, which is that pretty much all personal choice is not a matter of social impact or morality, that is a weird idea. It is a peculiarly Western-educated, post-Christian idea, and it's strange. It's strange because it happens to be unproductive and foolish. Which brings us to the Olympics. Okay, so what do these two things have to do with each other? Don't worry, we'll get there. So the Olympics, the opener happened over the weekend. Obviously, it's taking place in Paris, France. And the big sort of high-profile thing that happened in the opener of the Olympics, it was very weird. The big high-profile thing that happened is that there was an attempt to create what they called a scene on the sign that was the Last Supper. It was the Last Supper, inspired Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper painting, except everybody in the Last Supper painting was queer or trans. That's what this was. It was deliberately an insult to Christians all over the world. And then they float on in Dionysius, who is the Greek god of wine, except he's like a fat smurf on a cornucopia of flowers to sing to you. Here is what it looked like. It created, obviously, an enormous amount of backlash at the opener of the Olympics. This is where would we hide a revolver if we were naked? Where? I know where you think, but it's not a good idea. Yes. No more rich people, no more poor people when we get naked again. Yes. Whether you're slim or fat, we're just naked. This is the Olympics. Let's live how we were born. Naked. Let's live how we were born. So, welcome to the Weird West. That's pretty weird. It's a little weird. Just gonna put that out there. It's weird. It's not just weird, it's insulting, obviously, because it turns out that a Judeo-Christian heritage upon which the West was built, that values family and childbearing and child rearing, explicitly rejects this. I mean, understand that it's not just about the mockery of the Last Supper, which is disgusting and horrible. And the fact is that, again, they would never try this in France with Muslims, because if they did, Charlie Hebdo would have all of its employees murdered. This is about a society that has decided to revert to the pre-Christian ideal. Now, I know these people are very interested in insulting Christian tradition, but you know a place that doesn't? Grand Canyon University. It's a private Christian university in the beautiful Phoenix, Arizona area. GCU believes we're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. GCU believes in equal opportunity and that the American dream starts with a purpose. GCU equips you to serve others in ways that promote human flourishing and create a ripple effect of transformation for generations to come. By honoring your career calling, you impact your family, your friends, and your community. Whether you're pursuing a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree, GCU's online, on-campus, hybrid learning environments, they're all designed to help you achieve your unique academic, personal, and professional goals. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University, private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu. That's gcu.edu. Literally, the story of Adam and Eve in the Bible is about people living in a Garden of Eden in a state of nakedness, and then they eat from the tree of knowledge, and now they have to put on skins, because this is what it means to become a sinful human, is you actually have to wear clothes. So this is, again, a very pre-Christian ideal that is being promoted by the Olympics. Now, the person who organized this, whose name is Anne Descamps, she apologized for this. She said, I shouldn't mean it to be insulting to Christians. Of course it was meant to be insulting to Christians. Clearly it was meant to be insulting to Christians.
Clearly there was never an intention to show disrespect to any religious group. On the contrary, I think that Thomas Joly really tried to really intend to celebrate community tolerance. That was his word yesterday. And looking at the result of the polls that we shared, we believe that this ambition was achieved. If people have taken any offense, we are, of course, really, really sorry.
Okay, so it's about tolerance, except for Christians. Really intolerant of that. It's about singing songs about how we don't have any differences when we're naked, because all that really matters is sex, right? There really is nothing important about human life, about religion, about belief systems, or certainly about children. So why is that important? Well, if you look at France as sort of the bleeding edge of the cultural West, then what you see is that France, like pretty much every other country in Europe, as well as the United States, has an aging population with very few babies. Right? That's just a reality. And that's a problem. It turns out that a weird idea of human behavior in which all behaviors are deemed morally equivalent and societally useful tends to degrade into moral relativism. And that moral relativism tends to degrade into hedonism and then into a sort of cultural decay. France's population increase has basically stalled out. Right now, the fertility rate in France has dropped down to 1.68 children per woman compared to 1.79 in 2022. That is down from about 2 in 2013. The average age of mothers in France has been rising steadily over the same period. It currently stands at 31, okay, which is pretty old in terms of like the average age of having your first kid. Not only that, religious practice in France, of course, has gone completely by the wayside. In 2019-2020, according to one study in NC, 2019-2020, 51% of the population aged 18 to 59 in metropolitan France said they had no religion. No religion. While Catholicism remains the dominant religion, 29% of the population says that they are Catholic. Islam comes in second at 10%. The frequency and intensity of religious practice, however, varies by religious affiliation. Only 8% of those Catholics regularly attend a place of worship, compared to just over 20% of other Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists. 91% of people raised in a Muslim family follow the religion of their parents. Only 67% of Catholics follow the religion of their parents. So religion is falling away. Childbearing is falling away. Again, not a shock. And as it turns out, the prediction is that by about 2050, 20% of the population of France is going to be Muslim. You've already seen the massive social discontent that is set in France. The entire country is radically politically divided because of mass migration. And that mass migration has been made necessary by, again, the economic pyramid scheme that is an aging population in France. So what does that have to do with America? Well, again, it has to do with what actually is weird. I'll tell you what's not particularly weird. A Republican presidential candidate saying perhaps we should have tax incentives in order to get people to have more kids. Not super weird. Saying that, it's actually a benefit of society for people to have kids. We should make it easier for people to have kids in the United States economically. You can argue with the policy or disagree with the policy, but the idea that it is societally important and, yes, morally praiseworthy to have and raise children, and that society ought not be apathetic about that, that's not a weird position. It's a very not weird position. It turns out what is a weird position is the suggestion that what the West is truly all about is drag queens in the Last Supper with a pagan god of wine, a fat smurf rolling on in to talk about nakedness. That's the part that's not weird. Apparently that's totally normal. And that's Kamala Harris. Okay, Kamala Harris's campaign is built around this alternative moral structure in which we are supposed to be not only apathetic, but somewhat disdainful of religion, Christianity, traditional family. Like that is real about Kamala Harris. Again, forget about the cat lady, not cat lady, kind of snarky nonsense. The only thing that matters on an issue level is the fact that Kamala Harris actually identifies with one side of this particular political divide. And that does have major ramifications for the future of society. And let's face it, that's what we would normally call weird. Weird just means non-central. Okay, typically weird just means an outlier, like a statistical outlier. It used to be, in a traditional society, you have traditional families, traditional marriage, and that was kind of the center of society. And then, of course, you had people who lived alternative lifestyles and made alternative choices and all the rest. And they were, on the margins, accepted within the society, but on the margins of the society. What the left has done is they've exploded the norm in favor of the margins. And that's something Kamala Harris has done. Well, it's not just Kamala who's weird, it's also the economy. Everything is pretty insane right now. It's unclear what kind of market volatility we can expect in the future. This is why I like diversification. So does every smart investor. This show has been sponsored for a few years now by Masterworks Art Investing Platform. Masterworks investors have realized net annualized returns of 17.6%, 17.8%, 21.5%. That's just a few of their 23 exits so far. These are multi-million-dollar paintings from iconic artists like Picasso, but you don't need any art expertise or millions of bucks to invest in them. It's easy to do. A great way to diversify alongside your gold or your bonds. Be prepared for anything to come for that slice of your portfolio. Literally thousands of my listeners have already signed up for Masterworks over the years. You can join them just by heading on over to masterworks.com/Ben. That's masterworks.com/Ben. Past results are not indicative of future performance and do not include unsold works. All investing involves risk. I'm not an investor with Masterworks. See important Regulation A disclosures at masterworks.com/CD. And go check out Masterworks today. Smart way to diversify. Masterworks.com/Ben. Again, that's masterworks.com/Ben. realme.com/Ben to get started today. And again, she also happens to be kind of weird. Here she was on RuPaul's Drag Race last week. I mean, let's be a little real about this. Kamala Harris would be much more comfortable hanging out with the cast of The Last Supper on the sign at the Olympics than she would in like a traditional Baptist church in Georgia. Here is Kamala Harris.
Hi, everyone. It's Kamala Harris. Each day, we are seeing our rights and freedoms under attack, including the right of everyone to be who they are, love who they love, openly and with pride. So as we fight back against these attacks, let's all remember, no one is alone. We are all in this together, and your vote is your power. So please make sure your voice is heard this November and register to vote at vote.gov.
Can I get an amen?
Don't worry, JD is the weird one. There's all the cast of RuPaul's Drag Race saying amen to that. Don't worry, JD Vance is the weird one. He's clearly the weird one. By the way, yesterday, a video was released, Drag Queens for Kamala. So here we go.
Passed in Congress that'll protect me and you.
Black, white, Latino, Asian, or LGBTQ.
She could get this country back to where we can stand tall, keeping us safe from harm without building a wall. 'Cause she's a woman, W-O-M-A-N. I'll say it again. She's a
renormalizing the marginal. That's the basic idea of the Kamala Harris campaign. But she's not just weird that way, as it turns out. I mean, so first of all, again, this is longstanding Kamala Harris policy. It's just last year that she was gallivanting around in the White House with other members of RuPaul's Drag Race.
Phenomenon. You know it.
Indeed, I do. Phenomenon.
That is a very large dude with a mustache walking around in a dress at the White House. Don't worry, guys. JD Vance is the weird one. You see why they keep saying JD Vance is weird? They have to. Because JD Vance is the VP candidate. Let's be real about this. VP candidates rarely make a very big difference. Donald Trump is the Republican candidate. You know who's weird? Kamala Harris. She's weird. Not only is she weird, she is radical. She's a deeply radical person. Her entire campaign is now being run along the same lines, not as Barack Obama's 2008 campaign, which is the one everybody's all enthusiastic about. We're going to unite America, right? There's no red states. There's no blue states. There's just the United States. No black, no white, just American. Not that campaign. The 2012 campaign, where Barack Obama decided to divvy, slice, and dice up the American population into various intersectional groups, and then try to drive out the vote with each one of those intersectional groups. So in just a second, we're going to get to how she's running this campaign. And it is incredibly radical. It's incredibly divisive. We'll get to that in just one moment. First, after more than 2 years, Daily Wire Backstage Live is making its return to the legendary Ryman Auditorium. August 14th, join us live in our hometown of Nashville, Tennessee. One night, one iconic stage with one incredible opportunity to witness Daily Wire history in the making. I will be there, so will Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Andrew Klavan, Jeremy Boring, and a whole lineup of surprise guests. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Now, here is the catch. The Ryman, not that big a theater. It only holds about 2,000 people, which means it's going to sell out almost instantly. It's been 2 years since our last Backstage Live at the Ryman. Who knows when we'll do it again? So head on over to dailywire.com/Ryman. Grab your tickets right now. Okay, meanwhile, again, there is something weird about dividing the American population by race, ethnicity, gender. That's exactly what the Kamala Harris campaign is doing. So they've now rolled out a series of Zoom calls that are specifically designed by intersectional characteristic. So according to Reuters, more than 160,000 people joined the White Women for Kamala Harris Zoom call. This was, I'm not even kidding you, called euphemistically, Karens for Kamala. Because, of course, it's totally fine to label white women Karens. You just can't label them cat ladies if you're JD Vance. Right? That's the way that this works. You're allowed to call them Karens, as in, like, upper-class white ladies who really ought to be apologetic for, their race and their sex. But that's what they were doing on the Zoom call. So on the Zoom call, they were legitimately apologizing for who they were while pushing Kamala Harris. Which, if this makes you feel better, ladies, I got to tell you, I think there's something deeper going on that's more of a problem. Here was Ariel Fodor, a member of White Women for Kamala. Again, it's so weird. Can you imagine white men for Trump? Like, that's such a weird thing. White women for Trump. Like, Why would you divide the American people this way? But this is precisely what they're doing because, again, the 2012 Barack Obama theory of politics was cobbled together a bunch of upper-class white ladies and a bunch of intersectional minorities, and that will be your coalition. And that will be the new Democratic coalition. Not a class-based coalition, not a working-class coalition. Abandon all those people. You need white ladies for Kamala. Here's Ariel Fodor saying some pretty wild things on this white women for Harris phone call.
We are here because, as if you were here earlier, you've heard BIPOC women have tapped us in as white women to step up, listen, and get involved this election season. This is a really important time, and we all need to use our voices and influence for the greater good. No matter who you are all influencers in some way. So tonight, I'm going to share some do's and don'ts for getting involved in politics online and navigating the toxicity that comes with it. And spoiler alert, as much as the toxicity can come from the outside, it can come from us too. So first, don't isolate yourself. We can do our best work when we're in community together like we are tonight, because the toxic feels smaller when we support each other. But don't make it about yourself. As white women, we need to use our privilege to make positive changes. If you find yourself talking over or speaking for BIPOC individuals, or God forbid, correcting them, just take a beat. And instead, we can put our listening ears on. So do learn from and amplify the voices of those who have been historically marginalized, and use the privilege you have in order to push for systemic change.
Okay, I'm sorry, that's weird. I'm sorry, it's weird. Not that she's a white lady who's in favor of Kamala Harris. Sure, it's that she's being weird. I'm sorry, it's weird to say that you have to use your white privilege to you can't correct a BIPOC woman. You can't correct somebody who's of a race that has more melanin in their skin. Stop with your corrections. You're being right all the time. Put on your listening ears, white ladies. You have to use your privilege to help the poor, impoverished black people. Like, it's so weird. I'm sorry, that's weird. It is, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's your fault. Stop being weird. Not only that, there is now going to be, I'm not kidding you, there was, July 25th, a Zoom call for black, gay, and queer men for Harris. Like, it's weird. Like, this is what America's about? Dividing everybody up by black, queer, and gay men for Harris, white women for Harris. There's also, by the way, white men for Harris, which is precisely as terrible as you would think it is. They're calling it white dudes for Harris, and it's being led by uber Hulk Hogan type Pete Buttigieg. According to the New York Post, Kamala Harris is using potential Veep candidate Pete Buttigieg to woo white dude voters who need to be honest with ourselves and each other about the role we've played in our nation's history. Yes, apologetic white men come together for Kamala Harris. Ain't no way you're going to drive that Rust Belt vote with Pete Buttigieg talking about apologizing for being white. Like, ridiculous. So apparently, Pete Buttigieg was scheduled to appear 8 p.m. tonight with the group White Dudes for Harris. An email to a Post reporter says, quote, "As white dudes, we know full well how MAGA cynically preys on resentments. This moment of crisis is challenging us, but we won't let fear define who we are and take us or our country down a dark path. We're coming together to create a space of trust where white dudes can support each other and work to elect Kamala Harris the next president of the United States." Okay, first of all, let me just recommend, if you're creating a space of trust where white dudes can support each other, you should just join White Women for Kamala. Space of trust. Have you met a dude? This is not a thing. Space of trust where we can support each other? No dude ever has talked like this. Like, what? Okay, sure, I know. And then it's gonna be like, well, men can be sensitive. Okay. I'm just gonna point out, all is a little weird. It is. It's strange. You know what else is kind of strange about Kamala Harris? The fact that she's a congenital liar. Like, that's kind of weird about her. Again, they're trying to suggest that J.D. Vance is weird because of his policies and somehow interpersonal. Like, you heard J.B. Pritzker earlier talk about this idea that he had a thing for couches. He literally made a joke about a couch during one of his speeches at a rally. And the entire left then suggested that he had sex with couches. Like, they're weird. I'm sorry. If we're going to go into the Weird Olympics, the Democrats win the Weird Olympics. It turns out there are a bunch of problems with Kamala Harris' candidacy, and all of this is misdirect. It's all a giant misdirect. The biggest problem, honestly, with Kamala Harris' candidacy, aside from the fact she's personally weird, aside from the fact she believes weird stuff, is the fact, again, she is wildly dishonest. According to a new poll, 92% of Americans believe that Kamala Harris was involved in the cover-up of Joe Biden's health to at least some degree. And that is a very, very large majority. 68% of those who believe there was a cover-up of Biden's health said Harris had a great deal to do with it. And among the questions asked by this new YouGov survey, respondents were asked if Biden was unfairly pressured to drop out. 48% no, 32% yes. Whether there was a cover-up of Biden's health, 54% yes. So 54% yes, and of that, 92% believe that Kamala Harris was involved in the cover-up. Well, again, she was involved in the cover-up. Pete Buttigieg acknowledges as much. So he was spending the Sunday shows auditioning for her VP. And he said, well, yeah, I mean, we're all aware of his decline. Well, then what did you do about it? Why were you lying about it for years on end to the American people, you liars?
Was she aware of how he was doing?
We're all aware of how he's doing. Our country has watched our president lead.
All of you.
And yes, we've also seen the fact that he's 10 years older than he was 10 years ago.
Oh, wow. Why didn't you say any of that? Maybe because you're all liars. Maybe it's because of that. Now, Seymour Hersh has reported, I would say like 50% of the time he's right. 50% of the time he's kind of wrong. So I'm just going to report this with the giant grain of salt that it deserves. However, Seymour Hersh says that effectively speaking, Barack Obama ousted Joe Biden by threatening him with the 25th Amendment. According to Seymour Hersh, by Saturday, July 20th, former President Barack Obama was deeply involved. There was talk he would place a call to Biden. It was not clear whether Biden had been examined or just what had happened to him in Las Vegas. Apparently, they suggested he had some sort of health crisis in Las Vegas. The big three, the official said, referring to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, continued to be directly involved. On Sunday morning, the official told me, with the approval of Pelosi and Schumer, Obama called Biden after breakfast and said, here's the deal. We have Kamala's approval to invoke the 25th Amendment. And it was at that point that Joe Biden decided that he would step out of the race. He was pressured out of the race. But again, they were all part of the cover-up. They're also all part of the rewriting. So rewriting Kamala Harris means pretending that she is not, in fact, radical, and also that she both did many things as vice president and also had no responsibilities and never did anything as vice president. So on the she's not radical bandwagon, you've got Governor Wes Moore, again, Maryland governor auditioning for her VP pick. Here he was saying that the GOP is disingenuous to call Kamala Harris radical, despite the fact she was literally the most left-wing senator in America in 2019.
I think she needs to continue putting together her vision for the future. I think that, when you look at how she approaches things like public safety, first of all, it's remarkably disingenuous to call someone who is a prosecutor for her entire career someone who is soft on crime or someone who believed in defund the police. She's never believed in defund the police.
But she literally talked about defunding the police in 2020. And she was a progressive prosecutor in San Francisco, like Chase Bowden. That's not a thing. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Warren is trying to pretend that Kamala Harris had nothing to do with the border. Again, this is just rewriting in real time. This is Will Smith in Men in Black with the memory erasure machine.
Let's remember to start with the facts, and that is that border crossings now are lower than they were in the last year of the Trump administration. But recognize, and I know that Kamala Harris knows this is a problem that ultimately has to be solved by Congress. We need the tools in order to have more resources at the border, to have more resources in the states and cities that are supporting migrants. And I believe we need to create a pathway to citizenship. All of that is a part of what we need to do for comprehensive immigration reform. Kamala Harris will work with Congress and get that done.
No, she won't. No, she won't. Donald Trump doing the right thing. He did a rally over the weekend, and he was on the attack against Harris. He should stay away from the talk about her IQ and all of this kind of stuff. I mean, he's going to do it. There's no way to stop him. But it's really on her radical policies that he's going to win, because the fact is that he does occupy the middle position on pretty much every policy in America right now, including abortion, where he has taken the state-by-state position. Kamala Harris is the one who thinks that we need to federalize Roe versus Wade and legitimize abortion up to point of birth. Here was Donald Trump calling Kamala Harris unhinged over the weekend.
Harris is so extreme and unhinged that she has even declared the terms illegal alien and radical Islamic terrorism to be forbidden and unacceptable. You're not allowed to use those terms, but that's what it is.
Well, I mean, he's right about that. Then he says that Kamala Harris helped destroy the border. That, of course, is true as well.
Kamala Harris's deadly destruction of America's borders is completely and totally disqualifying for her to be president. You can't have a person like this as president. No person who deliberately releases these kinds of savage criminals to prey on our youth and our people, not just youth, elderly people too, are tremendous targets, should ever be trusted with power. Again, she has no clue. She has no clue. She's evil. The one job Kamala had was the border. That's the only job, and it was the biggest disaster in all of border history. And I'm not talking in this country, I'm talking all over the world. There's never been a border where people cross by the millions and millions.
Not wrong about that either. Again, she's very radical. Well, it turns out that Kamala Harris, she's kind of a car crash, but let's talk about your car. Who wants to deal with the hassle of selling a car? If you have a car that's just sitting in your driveway taking up space, you should consider donating it to Cars for Kids. They make donating your car so easy, you hardly need to be involved at all. Give them a call, or better yet, donate your car at carsforkids.org/Ben. That's cars with a K. All it takes is 2 minutes to put in your information. They'll schedule a pickup for a time that works for you as soon as the very next day. You'll get a vacation voucher plus a tax deduction. They've done this over 1 million times, so you can trust you're in good hands with Cars for Kids. Call now, 1-877-CARS-4KIDS, KARS, Cars for Kids, or donate online at carsforkids.org/Ben. Donate your car today. You just got an old car sitting around in your driveway picking up rust. There's no reason to let it be an eyesore. Instead, why not donate it, get a tax deduction, and help somebody out? Call now, 1-877-CARS-4KIDS. Again, that's with a K, KARS, Cars for Kids, or you can donate online at carsforkids.org/Ben. That's carsforkids.org/Ben. Donate your car today to get started. She's going to come back to earth because it turns out that sugar highs wear off. And when they wear off, turns out that people go back to their rational mind, and she's not a good candidate. Donald Trump also pointed out over the weekend, Hezbollah, which is a Lebanese terror group that is effectively an Iranian proxy group. They've been firing missiles consistently into Israel, rockets and missiles into Israel for almost a year. At this point, Israel has not responded in any sort of severe way. There was a Hezbollah attack that killed 12 Druze. Okay, Druze are Arabs who live in Israel because, as it turns out, Israel is, in fact, a multiracial, multi-religious democracy. People of all religions live there. People of all races and ethnicities live there. So 12 Druze kids were killed in the Golan Heights. Hezbollah fired a missile, and it killed all these kids in a town called Majd al-Shams, near the Syrian and Lebanese border. And Donald Trump pointed out that Hezbollah has been on the offense because the Biden administration is weak, which is 100% true.
Today's attack on Israel cannot be forgotten, and it will go down as another moment in history created by a weak and ineffective United States president and vice president. They wouldn't have done this if I were the president. They wouldn't have done it. And they didn't.
He is absolutely 100% correct about that. Turkey is also threatening the possibility of a broader war. According to the Jerusalem Post, Jerusalem and Ankara traded sharp barbs on Sunday, with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan seeming to threaten military action against Israel on Sunday as tensions heated up between the Jewish state and the Iranian proxy group Hezbollah. Should be a reminder at this point, Turkey isn't a member of NATO. They should be expelled from NATO. This is crazy. It's crazy to have an Islamist state as part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Totally wild and bizarre. Originally, Turkey joined as a bulwark against the Soviet Union. Now, Turkey is effectively an Islamist terror-supporting state. They support Hamas. Why in the world should there be an Article 5 obligation for countries in Europe and the United States to come to Turkey's defense if, for example, they go to war with, an American ally, an European ally, actually, like Israel in the face of Turkish terror? Like, it's totally insane. In any case, all of that is because the Biden administration has reoriented in the Middle East away from the burgeoning Sunni-Israeli alliance that was pushed by Donald Trump, the Abraham Accords, and toward instead Iran and its allies. Kamala Harris, she waited for about 24 hours to put out a statement on the murder of these Druze kids. Again, not Jewish, Muslim kids. And she said, quote, Israel continues to face severe threats to its security. Harris's support for Israel's security is ironclad. This came from her national security advisor, Phil Gordon. She's made no direct statement. Quote, the U.S. will continue working on a diplomatic solution to end all attacks once and for all. So disgusting. That, of course, is a way of trying to warn the Israelis off from destroying Hezbollah, as Hezbollah has emptied all of northern Israel of its citizens and now killed 12 Druze kids in the Golan Heights. And instead, she's putting pressure on Israel for diplomacy, backed, of course, by a despicable media. So the New York Times headline on this murder of the 12 Druze kids, quote, fears of escalation after rocket from Lebanon hits soccer field. Oh, is that fears of escalation? And then the picture is of a bunch of coffins of Druze kids who were killed by Hezbollah. The word Hezbollah does not appear in the headline. And the word Iran does not appear in the headline. The word terror attack does not appear in the headline. Instead, the New York Times is just trying to pretend that, it's about the fear of escalation. It's just a tit for tat back and forth. That is not what is happening. A terror group in another country, Lebanon is another country from Israel, has been firing rockets over a sovereign border for a year. Okay, this one's even worse from the Washington Post. The Washington Post front page ran a picture of people mourning a little girl who was killed by Hezbollah. That's the picture. The headline says, Israel hits target in Lebanon. The implication from the headline would be that these people are mourning somebody killed by Israel. These people are mourning someone killed by Hezbollah. Totally insane. Okay, this is your media. And this is the media that is promoting Kamala Harris. So if you don't trust the media, as you should not, you certainly should not trust them about Kamala Harris. By the way, the sub-headline there was, strikes against Hezbollah installations muted amid international call for restraint. So obviously Israel is the bad guy, according to the Washington Post. And again, all of this is being promoted by the Democratic Party, the same Democratic Party, half of whom ditched the address of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, to Congress. Senator Chris Van Hollen, who's been absolutely awful on all of this, Democrat senator, he says that it was a mistake for Democrats to even support Netanyahu coming to Congress. I don't see him making the same sort of issue with regard to, say, Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine. But of course, half his party is not staffed by people who support Vladimir Putin.
Was it a mistake for Democrats to support him coming to Congress?
I believe it was. I've expressed that view, but the reality is, obviously, he came. So for those of us who thought it was a mistake to have him here, we expressed our views by not participating.
Absolutely terrible, the Democratic Party. And so Trump is right about this. He says, by the way, anybody who is a Jew who votes Democrat ought to have his head examined. Hard agree. He put out a statement saying, quote, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel had a terrible, insulting meeting in D.C. with Kamala Harris, who also refused to preside over Congress during his speech, which is an obligation of the VP. Rarely has such a thing happened. Her ineptness will greatly prolong the war and delay the hostage release. The same people that embarrassed us in Afghanistan with their gross incompetence are the ones who are telling Israel not to fight any longer with Hamas. Forget October 7th, they say. Any Jewish person that votes for Kamala or a Democrat should immediately have their head examined. Likewise, Catholics who are being persecuted by this administration should not be voting for radical left Kamala. Vote Trump 2024, make America great again. Positionally, he is absolutely correct about everything that he says right there. He's not wrong. He's not wrong. Okay, in just 1 second, we'll get to more Biden administration failure, this time from Venezuela. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.